yeah, one of them days. I'm just in that mood. Anyway, today we are continuing our series on names in African American history to celebrate African American History Month. It's a little late into February. I mean, it's already what? Well, I'm feeling this. Feeling this. I'm feeling it. Not mean to seem so creepy, but anyway. While I am filming this on the 3rd, it won't go up until Friday. I'm filming it on Monday, so yeah. Anyway. But yeah. Today's video is about one of the most important individuals when it comes to African American history. One of the most important Supreme Court cases for that thing we call a court, the Supreme Clown Car. Anyway, yeah, let's dig a little bit into this. Dred Scott, extremely important. As it's saying there, 1857. Around what, 3 years before the Civil War officially kicked off. So we're at the height of all these laws that are set to protect slavery, the right to own people. But yeah, it is a decision that was horrible, and it was made under what I consider one of the worst Chief Justices in American history, Roger Taney. But, yeah, born in 1799 in Southampton County in Virginia, he would live until 1858. When he passes away in St. Louis, Missouri. So yeah, 59 years of age. Now, he was part of the ugly scar on American history that we know as slavery. The Dred Scott case was interesting because it was an attempt to see what they could do in the courts, and so they sue for their freedom of themselves and their 2 daughters in 1857. So 1857, he dies 1858, so yeah, this is towards the end of his life. But yeah, the Dred Scott decision is seen as one of the worst decisions ever in American history. Now, the idea is that Scott claims we should have freedom because we lived in Illinois and the Wisconsin Territory for 4 years. There is no slavery. It's illegal in those territories. And laws in those areas said that slaveholders would give up their rights to slaves if they stayed for an extended period. Like I said, slavery was a very, very contentious subject. And again, slavery, disgusting, wretched, pockmark on the face of this nation. Although that's kind of matched now by the Trump administration. But I'm not here to get into these modern politics. I do that enough in other videos. Yeah. In the case, the court decided 7-2 against Scott. 7 justices saying, no, you're not a citizen of those, while 2 are saying, yes, he had the right to be free due to states' rights. But yeah, they found that neither he nor any other person of African ancestry could claim citizenship in the U.S., and therefore Scott could not bring the suit in federal court under diversity of citizenship rules. Which, honestly, is a bunch of bullshit. Now, the diversity of citizenship rules, let's open this up, see what it says. It is a form of subject matter jurisdiction that gives U.S. federal courts power to hear lawsuits that do not involve a federal question. So, truly an action dealing with one state's laws against another state's laws. Because there's a lot of things that are not within the national purview. It's just rather which state's laws are more sensible or more applied to cases in question. For a federal court to have diversity jurisdiction over a lawsuit, 2 conditions must be met. First, there must be a diversity of citizenship between the parties, meaning the plaintiffs must be citizens of different U.S. states than the defendants. Second, the lawsuit's amount in controversy must be more than $75,000. If a lawsuit does not meet those 2 conditions, federal courts will normally lack the jurisdiction to hear it unless it involves a federal question, and the lawsuit would need to be heard in state court instead. The U.S. Constitution in Article 3, Section 2 grants Congress the power to permit federal courts to hear diversity cases through legislation authorizing such jurisdiction. Remember, Article 3 of the Constitution deals with federal courts and the so-called Supreme Clown Car. I will not call that a court if I can help it. Article 1 deals with, Articles 1 and 2 deal with Congress and the President I can't remember which one's which, but they deal with each branch: legislative, executive. Article 3 deals with judicial branches on a federal level. So, this said, the Dred Scott case ended up going to the highest court available, and the court says neither he nor any other person of African ancestry could claim citizenship in the U.S. So you're a slave, you're brought over, you have no choice. But you're not a citizen. Therefore, Scott could not bring suit in the federal court under this clause of rules. So he instead just had temporary residence in free territory outside Missouri, and did not bring about his emancipation because of the Missouri Compromise, which made territory free by prohibiting slavery north of the 3630 parallel, was unconstitutional because it deprived citizens of their slave property without due process of law. See, slaves were still seen as property. They weren't human. Even though we had the 3/5 compromise, oh, we got all these people, but they're not human. You see the lies and BS they're willing to go through to keep the institution of slavery. Now, Chief Justice Roger B. Taney had hoped to settle issues related to slavery and congressional authority by this decision, though it aroused public outrage, deepened sectional tensions between the northern and southern states, and hastened the eventual explosion of their differences into the American Civil War. Yeah. It was such a horrible and ridiculous decision. Taney is one of the worst Supreme Court justices, Chief Justices, without a doubt. And so you have this case, you have the raid on Harper's Ferry. You have bloody Kansas. So much going on. So much conflict before the Civil War even happens. But yeah, Scott would die a year later after the decision was made. He would die of tuberculosis. Again, this is a black mark on American history. It's something everybody should know, everybody should be aware of. The Dred Scott decision, also known as Sanford versus Dred Scott. Now, the Dred Scott decision, also known as Dred Scott versus John F.A. Sanford, or Dred Scott versus Sanford. I usually know it as just Sanford versus Dred Scott. That's what I often see it as. But yeah, the Dred Scott decision, and it's the big. It's one of the last big pushbacks of slavery before it was finally ripped out by its roots. Though the aftermath with such things as Jim Crow and the KKK weren't great either. But yeah, he is a name we need to be aware of when it comes to African American history. The case itself is one of the most important in a U.S. history, not just African American history, U.S. history, period. Yeah. But essentially, he's from a slave state. His owner brings him with him to a free state. But they're only there for a period of time. They're not there to live necessarily, to stay. But because they are there for an extended period, Dred Scott decides to test it, and Taney essentially says, you're not really a viable citizen because you're not really human under American law. And again, like I point out, yet we have the Three-Fifths Compromise built into the Constitution. That said, they still counted as 3/5 of a person for the cases of counting population. For the census. Because the South was always less populated when it came to white people. Because if you're not going to count slaves, the South was going to get toasted when it come to census counting. Because remember, our U.S. Constitution requires census to be taken every 10 years. And so they quite literally came upon the compromise. Okay, they'll not be full people because we don't want them to have rights, but they still count as 3/5. So yeah. It's I've already repeated this a number of times. It's a disgusting moment in American history that people even thought in this manner that people should not be treated as human. But yeah, Dred Scott, remember it. He had a wife, Harriet Scott. They had 4 children together. and it essentially went all the way up. Taney, and it's well known Taney wasn't a fan of non-white people necessarily, so yeah. He read a majority opinion that stated that enslaved people were not citizens of the U.S. They were property. I didn't want you to expand. No. Back down. Thank you. Goodness. Yeah. Taney. He was joined by Noah Swain. I can't remember Catron's first name. Daniel Nelson Greer Campbell. In dissent, we had Justices Ben Curtis, and who was McLean, John McLean. Not to be confused with Die Hard John McLean. But they were like, no, he's a person. He had the right to sue because he was there for a protracted moment of time in 3 states in which their laws proclaimed they could then be deemed free for having lived there for that extended period. But yeah. I wanted to bring this one to your attention because I've talked about the Dred Scott case before when doing my series on the U.S. Supreme Court, but what is now a U.S. clown car. Yeah. I just don't know how anyone else can see it anything other but a gross miscarriage of justice. But wanted to bring this case to your attention, this individual to your attention, Dred Scott. But we'll go ahead and end this episode here. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video for you if you want to do some further reading upon it. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.